Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for checking out my video. I'm going to show you how to install Manjaro Linux alongside of Windows 7. And the whole reason for this is the PC that I'm using has a recovery partition on it, and that recovery partition I just used to restore my computer to its original state. I wiped out my old OS and put a fresh copy of Windows 7 on here, and everything is working real smooth, real snappy. And I think it's good to do every once in a while. It's unfortunate that this is what happens with Windows. Over time, the more programs you install, the more files you acquire, the more things you start stashing. It just becomes a little bit bloated, and it slows things down, and I needed to get it back to bare bones. So it was a real nice option to have that recovery partition. I went to it, wiped everything out, put a fresh copy of Windows, and I also, along the way, became acquainted with Manjaro Linux. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if, now that I have this fresh copy of Windows, maybe I can have another copy of something else just to play around with, maybe get my feet wet, see what it's all about. I'm new to Linux, so I thought this was one of the nicest looking distributions. It seemed to be one of the more easier to use. All of these other features that I saw on some other people's videos when they were reviewing it that really sort of attracted me. So I thought this would make a really good first try at Linux. And so far, so good. I'm really enjoying it. And so much to the point that I'd like to share this video with you. So what we're going to do is install this in a little bit more of a non-traditional way. Like I said earlier, this is going to be an isolated dual boot. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to install Manjaro in its own extended partition, which will be separate from the Windows partitions on this computer. In a normal setup, I'll show you this picture that I put together just real quick. Most operating systems have a couple of different options for your boot settings. And in the case of a typical system, your system would boot into the Windows bootloader, and then from there you would have an option to go over to recovery. Usually this option is attached to one of the function keys on your keyboard during the boot process. You would hit sometimes F11 will automatically boot you into your recovery partition. Otherwise, if you don't touch anything, it should just go straight through to your Windows OS. That's a typical system. And that's basically what I have set up on this computer right now. But I would like to do it something a little bit different, and I'll explain that later. For right now, this is a graphic of what a typical Linux dual boot would look like. There is a program called GRUB. This is the Linux bootloader. And what that does is basically erases the Windows bootloader and takes over your hard drive. It provides you options to reach your recovery and your Windows OS. Yes, it does that. As well as your Linux OS. So in most situations, this is ideal. This is just what you'd want. But in the way you set up your partitions, it's a little limiting, okay? Because on most Windows installations, there are 3 primary partitions being utilized, and you are limited to only 4 primary partitions, okay? And in order to install Linux properly, you should have at least 2 partitions, okay? You would have one where you could install your boot, root, and store your home files, although that's even a little bit less than ideal. And then you would definitely need a second for your swap file, all right? And unfortunately, right there, if Windows is going to be using 3 primary partitions, we are going to be SOL when it comes time to installing Linux, unless, of course, you use something like Puppy Linux or another single partition distro. That's not necessarily the case with Manjaro. So this is what I'm going to be doing for our install of Manjaro. That's what I'm calling isolated dual boot. We're going to have it so that the Windows bootloader is by itself and will connect us to our recovery partition, our Windows OS, or if we want to jump over to Linux, it'll connect us to the Linux bootloader. All right, and then from that bootloader, we can boot into our Linux OS. So it's a little different than the traditional setup, but it's going to be a little more ideal for our installation because not only will it help us to maintain whatever is already set up with the Windows bootloader, it gives us a nice way to sort of isolate Linux from Windows. And it's even to the point where, because this will be installed in its own extended partition, if you're done with Linux, if you don't want to be messing with it anymore, if you said, all right, that was fun, but it's not for me, then you can go back into the Windows Disk Manager and basically just wipe out that partition, fold it back into your primary partition, and it was like nothing happened, okay? So this is what we're going to do right now. All right, in order to begin, open up your favorite browser, all right, and then go to the Manjaro website here and get a copy of the ISO. So click on download, go down to here, and I'm going to pick up the XFCE version, 64-bit ISO here. Download a copy of that. I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to click on it, but get yourself a copy of the latest ISO there. All right, and then we're going to need a program that gives us the ability to copy that file to a flash drive. And that, a lot of people like to use Rebooting for this, which is great, and it's something that's available in different platforms. So you can go to Windows, Linux, or Mac and get away with using this program. The one that I like to use for Windows, though, is Rufus. I find that this is fantastic. It's portable, does the job, and it's easy to use. So I highly recommend Rufus for Windows users. But later on, if you said, you know what, I'm really liking Linux, yeah, grab a copy of Rebooting and you can start burning ISOs over in Linux too. Okay. So for the purposes of this video, I'll probably just stick with Rufus because I already have it installed and it's easy. All right, and last but not least is you need to get a copy of EasyBCD. This is a great little tool. What this allows us is the ability to edit the Windows bootloader. And the reason we'll do that is so that we can add an entry to link us over to the Linux bootloader. All right. In order to get a copy of this, though, it's a little cryptic. You got to go through the website here, click on See Plans, and then over here where it says Non-Commercial, click on Register. And then right here, you can put in your name, your email address, click on Download, and get yourself a copy of EasyBCD. Okay? Very good. Now, we've got all the files that we need. Next step would be to burn a copy of that to our flash drive. Okay? So, you need to get... Whoop, I got it somewhere. Hold on. Yep. Well, this one will do, I guess. Any flash drive that's got a little over a gig on it should do the trick, and you can install that file. So I'm going to type in Rufus here. All right, get that installed and open it up. Okay, and with Rufus, what you're going to do is down here in the bottom, it says create a bootable disk using. And there's a little icon here of a disk. Click on that, and then navigate to your downloads folder or wherever you stored your Manjaro ISO. All right, and click on that ISO, and click Open. All right, and it will fill in the rest of the information for you as far as the device, file system, cluster size. It'll recognize your USB flash drive once you insert it. But the thing is, before you click on Start, just make sure that you don't need any of the files on that flash drive. It will erase them in order to burn the ISO on there. So back up your stuff before you start going crazy with Rufus, all right? And if that's all good, go ahead, click Start, and burn your ISO. And when you're done with that, click on Close, okay? Then we're going to need to do a couple of things to our hard drive in order to prepare it for Linux. And the first thing that we need to do is to defrag the drive. Okay, so go over to your Start menu, type in defrag. All right, where it says Disk Defragmenter, click on this, and click on your C partition. All right, and then click on Defragment Disk. And this is one of the more important steps in this whole process, especially if you have a large drive with a lot of files. Okay, the way Windows saves files on your hard drive is when it goes to write that file, it looks for wherever it can find free space. So what happens is that one file ends up getting written in a bunch of different places. The defragmenting program takes files that are split up like that and puts them all together in one contiguous section, one continuous strip there on the hard drive, right? And not only that, it moves files that are sort of out there in the middle of nowhere and condenses them so that they're all close together, easier to read, which does enhance your performance. Although some people may argue, the reality is we need to get those files all condensed so that it leaves us some space to work with, because we're going to shrink our primary partition in order to make some space to install Linux, okay? Once this is done defragmenting your drive, go ahead and click on it again. We want to be extra positive that this is ready for us to install Linux. And the other thing is, if it missed even one byte of information, that one byte is enough that it will limit the amount of free space that we can use for Linux, okay? So we're at 0% fragmented. That was 2 times through, looking good. Let's go ahead and close this, all right? And the next thing is to open up our disk manager, okay? And to get there, click on your Start menu, right-click Computer, and click on Manage. And this will pull up the computer management. All right, on the left-hand side here, you see where it says Disk Management. Click that. And this will give us a nice graphic of our hard drive, okay? And what you're looking at here is disk 0 should be your main hard drive, okay? This is a freshly installed copy of Windows 7 on a VM that I just put together, all right? And it's pretty much out. This actually may be the reverse on your machine. Typically, when it's installed to native hardware, you'll find the recovery partition is often to the left, followed by System Reserved, and then by C. But in this case, it's the other way around. It really doesn't make too much of a difference. We're only going to be working with this C partition, okay? And that's the one that we need to shrink. We're going to take up some space there. So in order to do what we need to do, we're going to shrink the volume. So right-click on the C block here, okay? And then go over here to Shrink Volume. And this will take a couple minutes analyzing your disk, and it will give us a number, the maximum number of gigabytes, or megabytes in this case, that we can use for our Linux partition, okay? The maximum shrinkable space here looks like it's just under 40 gigs. And I think that's okay. Now, if you have a larger hard drive on your computer, I would suggest maybe doing a little bit more than that. You don't need it for Linux, you really don't, but let's suppose you do get into it and you start working with video files and things like that. Well, you know, it'd be just nice to have a little extra space, give yourself some cushion. I like to go with a solid 100 gigs, you know, this way I can kind of divvy things up and give myself some room to grow if needed. I can also give myself room to make another partition for maybe another distribution if I want to install a second copy of Linux. If I like checking out Ubuntu or something like that, I could put it side by side, add it to GRUB. So there's a lot of fun things that you can do with Linux, but just keep that in mind, okay, when you're making this decision. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and use this maximum amount because I think we can, basically cut our drive in half here. You can see 39, and the drive is just a bit over 89, so that's about half. It should be fine. So you go ahead and click on shrink once you enter in the number here. And if you really want to determine that number, let's suppose you want to go with an exact amount. All you would do, pull up your calculator, whatever amount you want in terms of gigabytes. So if you said, oh, I want 100 gigabytes, all right, plug in 100 gigabytes, all right, and multiply that by 1024. That's the size of 1 gigabyte in megabytes, okay? And that will give you 1024. Add the 2 zeros. I mean, this is a basic sort of calculation. Some people aren't as precise, but I like it when the numbers line up. There's something rewarding about that 0.00. Oh, all right, call me anal, whatever. So we click OK on our shrink. This is going to take a few minutes. Give it some time, and it will cut our drive in half. Yeah, just about. So you can see now we have our C partition here, 51 gigs. We have our unallocated space. This is what we just created from the shrink, all right, 38.6. And then, of course, there's our recovery and our system reserved. All right, and we are done with the disk management side. We just leave this as unallocated, and we'll take care of the rest in Linux, okay? Now, we are almost finished here with the preparation on the Windows side. The most important step that we can do now is a little bit of CYA. And all we have to do in order to sort of protect ourselves here is open up a copy of EasyBCD. So go ahead and install EasyBCD. You can go ahead and just install it using all of the defaults. That will be fine. And then when you open up EasyBCD, it may give you a prompt like this. That's okay to click yes on that. What it's going to do, without you even knowing it, you didn't even have to ask, and this is great. I love the way this works. It's just like real nifty. It created a backup for us of our master boot record. So the Windows bootloader is now, whatever those settings were, are now stored in our documents folder. You can check this out. See, there's the file, EasyBCD backup. So that is really nice, knowing that, okay, when we go to install Manjaro, if something goes wrong, if we go too fast through the installation, maybe, and let's suppose it goes ahead and installs GRUB to our master boot record, and that's not what we wanted. Well, this will give us a possibility of rolling that back. We can get back into our Windows operating system, pull up this backup, and then apply that to the Windows bootloader and restore it, okay? And that will give us, just sort of a little fallback option, all right? I'm always, looking out for that sort of like extra step that might kind of make things a little easier on the way. Anything that gives you security is good. All right, so that's it. We'll come back to this program a little bit later on, but for right now, we're ready to install Manjaro, okay? So go ahead, get your flash drive ready, all right, and click on reboot, and we'll boot into the Manjaro install. Okay. I do apologize. This may show up a little bit small on your end, only because for right now, I'm running it in a VM, and the resolution isn't as high as it could be. All right. I already mounted my Manjaro ISO to the CD-ROM drive, so I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. Here we go. This is our welcome screen for the Manjaro install. Now, we have a few options here on this screen. start with Manjaro Linux, but then we also have start non-free drivers. And I like to use this option because what it does is it detects your hardware and then it installs the proprietary drivers for that hardware. There's a little bit less chance of some hardware conflicts here. If you start Manjaro otherwise, I think it just automatically loads the free drivers, and sometimes you can run into a little bit of a hardware conflict. If that is the case with your computer, then I would suggest, just reboot and come back and start with the non-free drivers, okay? It may take a little bit longer for it to do the searching and kind of go through the system and figure out what's what, but I think it's worth it. And in the long run, that detection has pretty much already been done. So when it comes time for the install procedure, it may make things just a tad bit faster. You'll see it when it goes to install the drivers later on. But just be patient as it begins to load this OS. What it's doing is copying everything into RAM, and it'll start running basically out of RAM. And then from there, we'll start making some changes to the hard drive and prepare it for the install. But I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this for the time being. Okay, so now we have our installer ready, and we can begin working on Linux. Okay, so before we go to the install process, we have to prepare the hard drive. Okay, we did a little bit of work in Windows. Now we have to finish that job in Linux. So we're going to minimize this welcome screen and then go down here to the menu, right? And up in the search bar here, type GP, right? And you'll see the first, or one of the top options here will be gparted. This is our partition editing software. Okay, so open this up. All right, the password is Manjaro, and we are going to see what we've got going on here. Yeah, okay, good. So if you take a look here, we've got a few numbers, and SDA1 is our primary partition. This is our Windows C partition, okay? The other ones here, SDA2 is our recovery. You can see that's for 10 gigs. And then we have our SDA3, which is the system reserved, all right? And where we will be working is right here on the unallocated space, okay? This may look a little different on your end. It depends on where that C partition is. Sometimes the C could be on 3. And if that's the case, then just focus on the unallocated, which will be right underneath the drive that you shrunk, okay? So in this case, SDA1 is our C drive, and right here underneath of it is that unallocated space. So what we need to do now is create an extended partition. And the reason we do that is because it will give us the opportunity to set up 4, and we're going to use 4 additional logical partitions. And they kind of act like primary partitions, at least in this case, when we go to do the install in this way. And it makes it good for the operating system to kind of function all by itself. So right-click on the unallocated space, click on New, all right? And then where it says Create As, change primary partition to extended partition and click on Add, all right? Now you can see we have our new extended partition and the same amount of unallocated space, okay? Click on this check mark here to accept the, to apply the changes. And click Apply, all right? Good. Now we have the unallocated space, which is attached to our extended. And you can see here, SDA4 is our extended partition. So from this point on, we are going to be adding partitions for Manjaro. Okay, so the first one we're going to make is our boot partition. So go ahead, right-click on this, click on New, and then under Create, leave that as logical partition. All right, and the size here, you can put in 350, maybe 250. I mean, you don't need a very large amount of space for GRUB on the boot partition, but 350 should be fine. So file system, is ext4. That's fine. We're going to leave that. You could use ext2. That should be fine. I know it's fine in an Arch install. So Manjaro, which is based on Arch, it should be fine there. But the GRUB installer does kick out a couple of error messages or warnings when using the ext2 file system. So 4 is a little bit better for that. So I think we'll be in the clear. Go ahead and click on Add. And click on this check mark here to apply. Click Apply. All right. Looking good. All right, good. So we've got ext4, 350 megabytes. And notice here the number that was assigned to that boot partition. Okay, we're going to come back to this. We're going to need to remember this number. You might want to write this down, SDA5. Okay, number 5 is our boot partition. Now let's create our root partition. Let's go ahead and click on, right-click on the unallocated space, click on New, and then we're going to make the root, let's say, I think we could probably get away with, I don't know, maybe about 10 gigs. That should be fine. All right, so we've got 10 gigs there. We'll also use the ext4 file system. Okay, click on Add. Great, so that's there. Click on the check mark here to apply. All right, good. So now we've got SDA6, which is our root partition. All right. The last two partitions are the home partition and the swap partition. And what I like to do is when I add this, right-click here, click on New. I like to type in here free space. I'll put the amount of space that I want to use for my swap file. And on this VM, I have set aside 2 gigs of RAM. So I'm going to use that as my number for swap. Okay, so 2 gigs, 2048, and then I put that here, free space following. All right, and it automatically adjusts the new size here. Now this number 26889, that's going to be the size of our home partition, and that's what we're creating on this step. But it's going to leave us exactly 2 gigs of space for our swap file. So go ahead and click on Add. Okay, and click on the check mark here to apply it. All right, great. And now you can see here our unallocated space is exactly 2 gigs. And remember what I said about how I like these numbers to be perfect. You know, it really doesn't matter, but it's nice. It always is nice when things come together the way, you know. So here we go. On this last step, right-click on the unallocated, click on New, and here we're going to change file system to Linux Swap. Okay, click on Add, and then go up here to the check mark and click Apply. All right, and that should finalize all of the partitions that we need for our Manjaro installation. Okay, and once again, just to recap, we've got SDA5 at 350 megabytes for boot, and then 6 is for our root, 7 is for home, and 8 is our Linux swap. Okay, that's good. Now you can close this. After that, we're going to restore our welcome screen here, and we have 2 options to install. We have our graphical installer, and then we also have a command line installer. And for this particular application, we're going to use the command line installer. Okay, so go ahead and click on Install Manjaro CLI. All right, great. Now, it's a little more clunky, but it's worth it because we're going to be able to do this the right way. So go ahead, click OK here, and let's set up our date and time. All right, so you have your choice, UTC or local time. If you're using an older PC, I might even recommend using the local time setting, because especially if you're doing dual boot between Windows and Linux, if you set one to UTC, especially Linux, it will have a tendency to interfere with the way timekeeping is done in Windows. Windows uses local time, so they'll tend to interfere with one another. Every time you boot up Linux, it'll change the clock to the UTC time, which tends to be 4 hours off from the East Coast, and who knows however many hours wherever you are. So you might want to consider local time. On a newer PC, this may be less of an issue. So right here, I'm just going to go ahead and go with the UTC using a VM, and I'm sure it's going to be okay. All right, and then I am in America, and we're going to go to New York, because I'm on the East Coast. All right, our date, August 2nd, yep. Now, here's a funny one. The time, right? I've got 1924, so that's 7:30-ish. And if you look over here, I got 3:23:24. Okay, so that's basically saying it's 11:30. So this time is right down here, according to my watch. Yeah, that time is right, but this time is 4 hours off at 19. So what are we going to do about that? I'm going to leave it alone, and you should do the same because it will work itself out later. Click OK. Now, we're finished with our date, time, and location. The next step is to do a little bit of disk preparation, but we don't have to do much here because most of it was already done for us. Okay. Now be careful here. Okay, don't just go right at it. We do not want to auto prepare our hard drive. We already did this. All right, so we're going to skip this step. Number 2, partition hard drives. We don't need to do that. We just did that. All right. Number 3 is if you're going to need to create any type of software RAID. I'm thinking if you're following along with this, that's probably not something you're going to need to do. And if it is, you're probably an advanced user, so I'm not going to worry about going into that. But the one thing that we do need to do for this particular install is set the file system mount point. So go ahead and click on OK for number 4. All right. And that's going to scan our drive and find what partitions are available. So as you can see here, we have, there's our Windows, SDA1, that's our C partition. SDA2 is our recovery. 3 is our Windows system reserved, all right? And then we go into 5. Remember, we wrote that down, right? 5 is our boot partition. It's the same size as our Windows reserved there. And then we have 6 for root, 10 gigs, 7 for our home, and 8 for our Linux swap. Okay, that's good. So it found all of the partitions that we have available. Now we're going to identify those partitions. All right, so next step, select the partition to use as swap. Okay, so that will be our last one, SDA8, the 2 GB swap partition. So hit enter on that. Would you like to create a file system? No. We've already done that through gparted. Okay, so it's done. We don't have to do it again. All right, select the partition to mount as root. That / means root. So that's not going to be 5. 5 is boot. 6 will be our root partition. This is the 10 GB root partition. So go ahead and click OK on number 6. That will be ext4 file system, but once again, we do not need to create the file system. It was already done in gparted. Okay, now this is the most important step. Well, there's several important steps, but this one is right up there. Select any additional partitions to mount. Okay, here's where we get the chance to mount our boot partition. Right, and remember that was SDA5. So we'll go down to 5. We'll hit on enter. All right, and you can see it already fills this in for you. /boot. Okay. So go ahead and accept that. It was also an ext4, and once again, we do not need to create the file system. It was already done in gparted. All right. And last but not least, SDA7. That is our home partition. So let's click on this. Okay. Now it automatically fills in boot once again, but we are going to change boot to home. All right. SDA7 home. Click OK. Once again, it's ext4, and do not create the file system. Okay, so all that's left are basically these 3, SDA1, 2, and 3. Those are the Windows partitions. If you have a flash drive in your computer, you may have a 4th one here, which would be like SDB1. That would be your flash drive, so you don't want to mess with that, okay? Just leave that alone. Go down to done. All right. And let's double check our work. Okay, so we have here at the top, SDA8 is the swap, good. SDA6, that's our root. Okay, that's the one with the little slash here, good. SDA5 is our boot. Here's boot, yep, that looks good. SDA7 is home. Okay, so far so good. Let's click on yes. All right, and then this is for the way that Manjaro assigns IDs for these partitions. The UUID is fine, so go ahead and click on OK there. And it's going to mount these partitions. Okay, great. Partitions are mounted. Now we can go back to the main menu, and we're ready to install the system. So this is it. Let's go ahead and install. This will probably take about 5 minutes or so, and I'll just go ahead and fast forward this video. All right, looks like we have success. Okay, go ahead and click on continue here, and then we're going to have to give it a couple more minutes so that it can detect some hardware and install a few drivers. Okay, looks like we are ready to configure our system. The install's done. Now we just got to set a couple of other things up before we can move on. So go to number 4, configure system. Okay, let's enter our root password. Okay, like that. The next one is to set up our user accounts. You have to use all lowercase on this. And we do want to give ourselves sudo rights, yes. Let me set up your password here. Okay. Now these 3 here are optional to set up your locale, and if you remember earlier on, it did ask us what region we were in and what time zone. So based on those entries, it should be able to automatically determine that we are in an English-speaking country and with a QWERTY keyboard layout. So we should be in good shape there. We can go ahead and go back to our main menu, and it will just go ahead and automatically determine the locales and set that up for us. Okay, looking good. Now, stop. We are not going to use the installer here to install bootloader. All right, this does not give us the option to install the bootloader to the partition that we made for it. Okay, if you go through with this installation right here, it will install bootloader to the main hard drive, basically right to the master boot record of the hard drive, and you will lose the Windows bootloader. Okay, so skip number 5 and quit. All right, the rest of this we are going to take care of in the terminal. Okay, so let's go ahead and minimize our welcome screen and open up terminal. We're going to go down here to menu. First option is terminal emulator. Okay, pop this open. I'm just going to make a quick little adjustment to appearance here. I'm not crazy about transparency. I like to see things nice and clear, and hopefully this looks good on your end. Okay, now if you navigate to the following website here, I'm going to pull up web browser. This website, which is part of the Manjaro Wiki, will really help us to install GRUB to this particular partition. So this is the site, HTTPS. Okay, and I'll put a link in the description just so you have quick and easy access. I have this pulled up on my other computer here. I missed the period here. Okay. All right. Pull up this page, and it will give you step-by-step instructions for installing GRUB. Okay. So you can pretty much go 1, 2, 3, right through the line. All right, right through the list. So let's begin here with this command to list our partitions. All right, we'll pop open the terminal here, and we have tech F. Okay, there we go. So now this is listing the available partitions that we have. All right, and it's just a recap of what we've already done. Here are the 1, 2, and 3. These are the Windows partitions. All right, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8 are the new Linux partitions. Okay. This is just a quick and easy way for you to see what's available just in case you didn't write this number down, okay? That's why they do that. Let's go back to our web page here. All right, next step is to install chroot. So we're going to go ahead and copy this command here, the yard command, and plop that there, and install chroot. Proceed with installation, yes. And yes again. Down here at the, yep, right here. Okay, great. So now we have chroot installed. And we are going to chroot right now. Let's do that. Next to next command, sudo. Okay. I'm going to minimize this window here and go over to the new terminal that just popped up. And once again, I'm just going to make a quick adjustment to the transparency settings so that it looks nice and crisp for you over there. Now, what you can see here is that it chrooted us into SDA6. That is the root partition of our Manjaro install. Okay, it's red. It says Manjaro, and we got a slash. So we are right now we're SU, and we are in our root partition on the hard drive. Okay, so from here we're going to do a couple of other things. Let's go back to our page here. Once again, it's saying that we can use the list command here to take a look at what partitions are available. Now, you'll notice these look a little different from within our install. Okay, now we have some mount points. Now we can make sure that these correspond. We have SDA 5, yep, that's boot. 6 is root, 7 is home, and 8 is swap. So all of these are mounted as they should be. Okay, so that looks good. The next step is to go ahead down to here and mount our system partition. So once again, let's go into here and we'll issue this mount command. Mount /dev / our root partition, SDA6. We're going to put that in mount. Okay, and click OK on that. And we're also going to mount our partition for GRUB. Okay, this is where we're going to substitute SDA 5. Okay, so I'll go back into here, mount dev SDA 5, and we're going to put that in /mount/boot. Okay, we're going to change directory into /mount, and we'll take a look at what we have. Now you can see here is our root. This is the root, and it's a fresh install. This is what we just put on the hard drive. And then we also have our boot right there. Okay? So far so good. Now we're going to issue a few more mount commands here so that we can make sure that we basically direct the GRUB installer to use all of the files on the hard drive. Right now, they're mounted to the flash drive. We're going to redirect them over here to the hard drive. Okay, and we'll just start by copying each one of these commands. All right, so we've got mount tab t proc /mnt/proc. That's the first command. Number 2, mount tech t sysfs sys slash mnt slash sys. Okay. And then we're going to do this one's a little different. Mount tech o bind slash dev slash mnt slash dev. Okay. Great. And the last one is mount tech t dev points pts to mount dev pts. Okay. Great. And then we're going to chroot into mount. There we go. Great. We're almost there. Just a couple more steps here. I'm going to go back over to this page. All right, and right here where it says restore grub, we need to install a couple of packages here. We have mtools and os prober. So I'm just going to copy this command into the terminal. Drop that right there. Hit enter on that. And let it do its thing. Proceed with installation. Yes. And yes. Okay, now we've downloaded the files that we need. For BIOS systems, this is your set of instructions right here. All right. If you have a UEFI system, you've got a little bit more work to do. You can follow the instructions here, but I have it set up as BIOS. That's what this tutorial is all about. So we're going to use this command here, grub install, right? But notice the device here that we're using, SDA. It's not assigning a partition. If we do this command as it is, it will do the traditional side-by-side install where grub takes over the entire device. SDA means your whole hard drive, basically. It's not, there's no number here, so it's not pointing to any particular partition. So all we're going to do is make a slight modification. We'll put this command in, okay, and we're going to add the number 5 because that's the partition that we're going to use for boot. All right, so let's go ahead and hit enter on that command. And right now it's installing grub on that partition. Great. So you can see here, kick back a couple of warnings. This is what I was mentioning earlier about the ext2 file system. It doesn't support embedding. I mean, whatever. It's not going to be a big issue for us. The last thing for us to do now is just to update grub. Okay, and this is it. Sort of the moment of truth here where we finalize our installation. Okay, hit enter on that. All right, great. That's it. Now we're done. Check it out. We have a bunch of files that were found. We got our background file. We got our Linux image was found. A couple other images here. These are the advanced options images, which we'll use if you need advanced options. And then it also found, check it out, it found our Windows loader over here on SDA1, our first partition, on our C partition. So it found that. It also gives us an option for memory test. So looks like everything is just right. We are good to go. We can close down our terminal and we are ready to reboot. All right, close this down. All right, so here's the deal. When we reboot, we're basically going to be leaving Linux on its own. It's going to be sitting there on the extended partition, and since we installed grub on SDA5, our reboot is basically going to send us directly back into Windows, okay? So we're not even going to see that Linux is on the hard drive until we get back into Windows and make a little adjustment, all right? And that adjustment is pretty simple. Well, that's what we'll use the BCD editor for. There you go. See, it went right back into Windows. We don't even have to stop. At go, do not collect 200. We're just going straight to Windows. Okie doke. So once you get back into your Windows OS, we need to tell the Windows bootloader that there is another operating system on here. And in order to do that, we're going to pull up the EasyBCD program. So go ahead and double click your icon there. It's okay to make changes, yes. And then here, we are going to take a look at our boot menu, okay? Click on the Edit Boot Menu button here, and you'll see that all we have right now is Windows 7. And yeah, that's right. And it even says skip the boot menu, so it just basically goes straight into Windows 7. Well, we are going to add Linux in here, okay? So in order to do that, click on the button, the third button down, Add New Entry. All right, and across the top tabs here, I'm going to click on Linux. We're going to change the type from GRUB to GRUB2, because that's what Manjaro is using. And then here under the name, you can name it whatever you want, but I'm just going to call it Manjaro Linux. Manjaro. Yep. Okay. And then here on the drive, we are going to assign the right drive here, and that is going to be not this one. You see this says NTFS? That is the Windows file system, okay? We are going to partition 4 here, which is Linux. That is the 350 megabyte partition that we installed GRUB on, okay? So the numbers are a little off. They're just basically one number off in Windows, because when it sees the extended partition, it doesn't actually assign a number to that partition. It skips over to it and goes to the next logical number, which is 4. So it's basically listing them as they are discovered on the hard drive. And that extended is really kind of just like maybe like a little highway marker or something that says, yeah, there's something more going on behind here, but look to the next exit, basically. So here we are, partition 4, Linux 350. Select that. You go ahead and click on Add Entry. And then let's go back over here to Edit Boot Menu. Yep, there it is. Now we can see Windows 7 and Manjaro Linux. All right. And rather than skip the boot menu, I'm going to put this on countdown. Okay. And we're going to count down from... Hello, a little bit of a snafu here. Well, it looks like right now I'm kind of stuck at 30 seconds. So I'm going to leave it at 30 seconds. Shouldn't be an issue for you. You can make it however many seconds you want. It's locking me in at 30, but I would normally put it down to maybe about 5, because I don't think I need more than 5 seconds to make a decision about what operating system I'm going to use. So whenever that's set the way you want it, click on Save Settings. Okay, it says down here, bootloader settings saved successfully. Great. Go ahead and close this. And now, moment of truth. Let's reboot our Windows operating system and see if we can't get to our new modified Windows bootloader and then boot into Linux. Here we go. All right, there it is. So you see here we got Windows 7 and Manjaro. So let's go ahead and boot into Manjaro. Excellent. There we go. That's exactly what we were going for. So basically, the Windows bootloader hasn't been touched. We added our own entry, which redirects over to the GRUB bootloader. And then if we want to get back to it, you even have this option here. You can go to the Windows Vista loader on SDA1, and that'll kick you right back over. So, let's say you made a mistake. Oh, you can go right back. It's all good. Let's go ahead and boot this Manjaro for the first time and see how it looks. Once again, I'm going to have to apologize. You can see here we got a little bit of a tiny screen, and that's because I'm working within a VM, and I have to install the VM Tools package in order to get the full screen view. But since this is a fresh install, it's basically bare bones. This is stock, vanilla. And it's going to take a little bit, so I'll just go ahead and fast forward through this. Okay, Looking good. There were a couple of little messages that popped out there, but it looks like it got itself situated. I think some of those messages may be related to the fact that this has been installed on in a VM, and it may not run into those types of errors or warnings on an actual install. At least it didn't for me when I did it for real on my Sony Vaio laptop. So here we are. Let's go ahead and put in our login password and check out Manjaro for the first time as its own isolated dual boot. Looking good. There we go. Great. Well, generally, when you install this on native hardware, you'll get the full screen. But hey, this is what what could we do? Well, that's it. I don't think there's anything else that I need to show you. Good news is our timekeeping. I got, you might not be able to see this because my face is in front of it, but I have 23:55, so that's 11:55, and I got 11:55 on my clock, so looks like our timekeeping is just right. Let's double check it over in Windows just to be sure, because sometimes you do run into that little bit of a problem where Windows and Linux sort of battle to keep time. Not only that, you can get a full screen view of, at least be able to see my clock. Let's see. What do we have? 11:55. Well, tell you what, looks like we're in good shape. So I think we can leave it alone. There is a couple of extra steps that you can do, a little modification you can make to the registry. You can also disable Windows Time and then install a third-party NTP client, and I did that on another PC and it works just fine. I might do another video on that at a later date, just to kind of, in case anybody else is kind of coming across this problem. And you really might not figure it out until you start playing with it and notice, oh, looks as though we're running into a little bit of a conflict of times, between the two OSs. But that's it. Now you've got a nice fresh copy of Manjaro installed in its isolated partitions away from the Windows bootloader. And if you don't like it and you say forget about it, you can just go back into your Windows disk management, delete all of those extra partitions, and then wipe out that section and absorb it right back into your C partition, and it would be like it never happened. So I hope that you find this helpful and that you continue to tinker around. I can always encourage it because I know I have a lot of fun doing stuff like this. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks a lot. God bless.